Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. You guys all know that. I am, as always, your very grateful host. Thank you so much for everything you folks have done. Ever since we made the move to 5 days a week, you folks have just shown up in numbers. You've just given us grace and really come through. If you're not out there liking and sharing and subscribing and sending me all these DMs if you're not doing your part, then I can't sit here and do what I'm doing. So eternally grateful for what you're doing so that I can sit here and live my dream and do this for a living. I hope that one of the reasons you're doing that is because we keep bringing on these powerful men to speak to you about these incredibly powerful subjects. And we don't shy away from faith. Not here, not in this program. A lot of folks, you have to kind of tiptoe and walk that line, and here we don't. And that's really been embraced by you folks, and I appreciate it very much. As we move forward, you guys all know what time it is. If you're a friend of the program, you know what we're doing. I need to take a sip of my preferred beverage. Oh, good stuff. Just made a new fresh cup of that before we jumped on here today. And you guys all know what it is. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, beautiful. Just like my wife. They have absolutely fantastic stuff. They brew a mean bean. It's a fantastic cup of joe. They do all the right things for all the right reasons. And they support veterans, which is one of the biggest reasons why we support them. You folks all know how important veterans are here at the Power Man podcast, and it's important to Freedom Hill also, which is why we support Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up. Tell them Power of Man sent you. One more sip so I can keep up with this youngster across the table from me here. All right, we'll be drinking that throughout the podcast. Got to keep that going. Good stuff. All right, folks. We have a fantastic guest with us today, Christian leader and author, authority on student ministry and discipleship, guiding young believers beyond achievement, which I think is going to be an interesting conversation. Author of The Path. What if the way of following Jesus was different than you thought? Please welcome Benjamin Crawshaw to the podcast. Benjamin, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. And just for the record, Rory, I would never call myself an authority on student ministry. Okay. I've been doing it long enough to realize I'm not an authority. Once I start feeling like I am, they throw a curveball at me. And so I just want to make it clear up front, not an authority on student ministry. Okay.
Okay, gotcha. I apologize. I didn't mean to like back you into a corner there.
No, I just heard it and I was like, man, that's a bold statement. Student ministry, that it's tough to declare yourself an authority in that realm. I love it. I love working with students. I love passionate about students. Been doing it for a long, long time, but authority, that might be a stretch.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Benjamin, certainly tell everybody, all of our audience here, who is Benjamin Crawshaw? What are you about? And what brings you here today, brother?
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate you having me. I really wish I had a cup of that same coffee right here in front of me, but I don't. So I have to watch you drink it out of your Indiana University mug right there. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I grew up in church, preacher's kid. Grew up, didn't have a problem with the church. Loved the people at my church. I just had no interest at all in serving or following Jesus. I didn't have a problem with God. I just wasn't my thing. And I was in college. My old youth pastor said, we're going to summer camp, the youth group, and we need chaperones. All right. I'm aging myself a little bit, right? They have cool names for them now, but back in the day, we were just chaperones. And so needed chaperones. I was in charge of the seventh grade guys. I was a terrible chaperone. The speaker was just red faced and angry all week. And the last night of that camp got a hold of my life and took me up to that altar, and life has never been the same since then. So that's really where got captivated by Jesus and the idea of following Jesus, which is from then on, that's just what I wanted to do with my life. It literally was never the same from that moment. And graduated college, worked in church, worked in a small church, worked in a big church, worked in parachurch for a while, and then went through really what a lot of people go through in life is, just the valley, just things in life not going the way I'd hoped, not going the way I expected, a lot of things kind of crumbling beneath me, so to speak. And I think for a while, Rory, I just said, you know what? God and I are good. it's just all y'all that I have a problem with, meaning the other Jesus followers. I trusted you, you hurt me. So God and I are good, love my kids, but I'm just going to keep y'all at a distance. And on the second half of COVID, um, started, I was struggling finding work first time in my adult life. And I reached out to Robbie Engel, who's the president of TrueFace. And I said, hey, I'm looking for work, struggling a little bit here. So he had me edit some stuff, and in a way that only God can. I'm editing this stuff, Rory, and I'm like, what is this stuff? Who is this for? This is, and so I called him and I said, hey, who is this for? This TrueFace stuff that I'm editing, who's your target market or whatever? And he said, we really our demographic is middle-aged stuck Christians. And so they had this profile. It's a guy named Brad. Brad's just, a middle-aged. I was like, I think I am Brad. I think that's me. So I'm editing these materials that are really written for me, and really through TrueFace, and really kind of starting by editing their materials and then being a part of their team. And it was really this idea, Rory, of me not just trusting God, but learning to trust other people, and learning that, trusting God and trusting others, they run simultaneously. To love God is to love others. That's why Jesus said the greatest command is to love God and then love your neighbor as yourself. These things run parallel. And so TrueFace was really a big part of me learning to uncross my arms and trust people, and not just live with God on an island. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I wondered what that was. I saw in your bio, I saw True Face, and I was going to ask you
Right.
about it. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you kind of launching right into it there.
Yeah. TrueFace is all about helping stuck Christians get unstuck, finding peace and freedom. And they've been doing that in a number of different ways, a lot through books, small group studies, through leadership, creating high trust, environments. But, you know, their original slogan was beyond the mask. In the world of following Jesus, where we do have this tendency to put these masks on, pretend like everything is fine. Now, of course, after COVID, beyond the mask started to mean something totally different. So I think they had to change the tagline. People were reaching out thinking we were a COVID mask company, and we're like, no, 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 this is symbolic, So, but the idea of showing up with your true face, showing up authentically as you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, these high trust, authentic communities where you can, you know, be fully known as you fully are at your last 5 and last 10%. And it's been a huge part of me to be a part of that ministry and what they're doing, but really what it's done for me. While we're out offering those materials are offering me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I love the mission. The middle-aged, stuck Christian, trying to get unstuck. I mean, that
Right.
that covers a lot of ground. And
Right.
I talk to men every single day who I think would qualify as
Right.
probably stuck. So let me ask you, when you're talking about getting, them stuck, unstuck, are you talking about folks who have like lost their faith, haven't found their faith, have questions about, faith? I mean, is there a particular guideline that it goes with? Because stuck's kind of big.
Stuck is a big word, and there
Yeah.
is no specific guideline. The ministry kind of, it really, it kind of like a lot of ministries do, and maybe your podcast has it. You have this vision for what it's going to look like, and then God begins moving it and turning it in some different directions that you didn't expect, and then it's shaping itself more than you're shaping it, so to speak. And it was a lot of people who had been kind of, I don't know, I want to say burnout or exhausted by the performance level Christianity. And it's me. When I first came to Jesus in college, it was president of FCA. We had these chapel services during the week. I'm still going to church on the weekends, and then graduated, worked at a church. I'm saying yes to everything, doing everything. More quiet times, white knuckling, and all this stuff, and really missing that peace and freedom of, hey, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Remain in me, and you will bear much fruit, the abide, and all that stuff. So a lot of people who had lived a lot of their life in what we call the room of good intentions and had never discovered the room of grace, to be loved sons of King Jesus, who's a good father, to understand your identity as a son of a good king, a good father who loves you and likes you, and that you can rest in that, and that who you are as a follower of Jesus comes out as a result of his spirit inside of you, abiding and remaining, not out of your efforts and striving and earning and fear and control. It comes out of trusting and receiving. So it became a lot of the stuckness had to do with people who were kind of worn out by the performance-based Christianity, people in faith who had tried and tried harder and white knuckled and tried harder and found themselves exhausted. And we offered this idea of, hey, what if there was a different way? What if there was a different way of following Jesus?
Okay, the performance-based Christianity.
Right.
That's a loaded term right there. So, what exactly, when you say that, what do you and the folks from TrueFace, what do you folks mean when you say performance-based Christianity?
Well, when you look at the letter Paul wrote to the Galatians, and he said in chapter 3, you foolish Galatians, you started off in the spirit and now you have kind of gone to the law and your own efforts. I am all about, I mean, knowledge is like my passion. I love knowing more. I love the idea of Jesus transforming me and the way I view the world and the way I interact with the world. But there's a difference between doing things for God and doing things with God. There's a difference. The performance-based Christianity is that I have to do more, I have to know more and do better in order to receive this love from God. Where what we're saying is, no, it is out of a relationship with God. It's you remain in me. It's his spirit working in me. And out of that, that's the fruit of the spirit. It's the fruit of the spirit, not the fruit of the Benjamin, right? That's what I thought it was for a lot of time. I was living, the fruit of the Rory. It's like, yeah, I can perform and try to produce all this stuff in me, or I can realize that Jesus did for me what I can't do for myself. And that the grace of Jesus, which was the saving grace, is also the sustaining grace. And so the way I began my walk with Jesus is the way I continue my walk with Jesus, which is trusting and receiving. So it's not earning, striving and earning. It's trusting and receiving. It's not doing things for God. It's doing things with God. And that's really the difference when I say performance-based Christianity. It's not living this life that says I have to know more and do better in order to be loved by God.
Interesting, interesting. The trusting and receiving. So I know that that's a huge thing that people have an issue with, of course, is trusting and receiving, anything these
Right.
these days.
Right.
But it sounds a little like, as stuck Christians, we're trying to maintain control, like things are still in our
Yeah.
control. And so we're going to do what we have to do in order to have this relationship. And what you're offering is let go of that because it's nothing you can control. You just have to receive what's already there for you.
Right. Yeah. As a man on an audience that speaks a lot to men, one of our issues among many is our pride, right? Is, pride is rooted in I can, where humility is rooted in I can't. So that pride, that's what you're talking about, that
Right.
control. It's talking, living out of trying to control what we can do. And this is what the Apostle Paul was always trying to address with people in his letters. It's like, you can't, you can't. If anybody could have, it's me, right? The Apostle Paul was like, if anybody could boast in what they've done, it would be me, but I don't. It's Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christ lives in me. So that's humility, which is I can't. It's Christ doing in me what I can't do in myself. Christ producing fruit in me that I can't produce in myself. And trusting and receiving is, yeah, it seems simple, but it's oh so difficult, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like it sounds like we're going against sort of the norm of culture in general in terms of, going against the achievement based, objective because
Right,
everything we do from the moment we're born, especially, my kids were in sports like the whole time. So
right,
everything we do from grades to sports to everything else is all about, achieving and, rating and how well did you do and
right.
grades and, the whole bit. So, I mean, that's conditioning over your whole life that you have to break out of. But that seems like the way to go
Yeah,
here.
I mean, yeah, same. I grew up sports, Christian school, and preacher's kid. So yeah, it was, a lot of that stuff is great. I mean, again, knowing more, doing better is great stuff. It's just that at some point we get to the end of ourselves. And to your point, our culture, it's like, yeah, grind harder, right? Hustle more, grind
Right.
harder. That's the message of the culture. But all of these different ways, and this is what we talk about in the path, all of these different ways, some of which are good, some of which are not good, all of these different paths, whether it be um, achievement and success, or whether it be travel, whether it be self-love, whether it be, getting involved in humanitarian work, or all of these things eventually come back to us. It's I can. And there's just a way that's different, which is just to say, I can't. It's Jesus. It's your kingdom. It's your life in me, your life through me. And yeah, it's not just different from the world we live in. It's entirely upside down, right? That's the way of Jesus. Jesus came in a culture that had a hierarchy of power and washed his disciples' feet and then laid down his life and then said, hey, you go do the same. And all the disciples gave up their lives on behalf of loving other people. And so Jesus just flips it upside down. It's the same in our culture today. It's grind harder, hustle more. And Jesus is like, no, I mean, you can try, but it gets exhausting after a while. And I offer a different way.
Nice. Now the book, The Path.
Right.
Okay. What led you to write this?
I think, what we were talking about earlier, Rory, this working with these, the middle-aged stuck Christians, right? And we started thinking, what if we could write to people before they get down this road, right? Before they find themselves frustrated from these years of trying to do it all on themselves and think I can and all that. So we started thinking about our own biological kids. And then I started thinking about the students in the student ministry I work with, and tons of research on Gen Z. I mean, we did months and months and months of research trying to write to them. And then by the time it was all said and done, it was just a book for human beings, right? I mean, I'd give this to 15-year-olds and I would give it to 50-year-olds. But it originally started as us just saying, hey, we want to write a book for our own teenage kids. That's how the whole premise got started in the very beginning.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So get to the people before they become middle-aged stuck.
That
So to
was the
speak.
goal. That was the
Nice.
goal. Yes.
Nice. Okay. So that's how you get to writing it. What is, tell us about the book itself. What does the book consist of? Is it a user's manual? Is it a motivational piece? What exactly is the path?
Yeah. I mean, it was a multi-year project where we ended up speaking partially in allegory. So it's partially through a narrative, and then, a smaller percentage of teaching. And it's just 8 chapters. It's a pretty short book. I would hold one up, but I've given all my copies away, that usually have one here on my desk. And it's told through the story of a young architect named Tal. And it's not in like present day. But it's not in a specified time period or place. So kind of think in terms of those, you know, it, I don't compare it to Pilgrim's Progress, but that's kind of the idea. And, that's kind of what happened with some of these, Narnia, Lord of the Rings type things where, it wasn't necessarily specified a specific, date or time. And although Chronicles of Narnia might have been specified at a specific time, I don't know. Don't quote me on that. All right. I don't want to get in trouble for that.
Okay.
But yeah. And so Tal is trying to grow in the career and reach these different levels, and understanding this sense of, it's the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon had everything and was searching for purpose and meaning. And all of these places he went, he was discovering these things to be meaningless. And Solomon had everything and died in disgrace. And then you juxtapose that with the Samaritan woman who met Jesus out at the well, who had nothing and discovered everything and became the first missionary to Samaria. And so the journey of trying to find what you're looking for in life is really taken through this young architect named Tal. And so we follow along Tal's journey, with Jesus, and then takes the leap with Jesus, and then begins on this path, this way of following Jesus and what it looks like.
Nice. Okay. So it's a story in that way. And
Correct.
and you're laying out the way to follow Jesus.
We yes, that sounds yes, yes. I mean, I don't want to say it that, I don't want to say it that yeah, all of us together, years thinking through for our kids and for other people, and we have a limited amount of time. We can't write a 1,000 page book, right? So in a limited amount of space, what are some foundational things we would like for them to know? So that's what we laid out.
Nice. For folks who are trying to find that, who are trying to follow the path, right? What do you find in the work that you do? What do you find are the biggest obstacles that kind of get in the way of the stuck Christians getting unstuck?
Yeah, I think that when I grew up in church, the message to us as followers of Jesus, when I at 18 put the trust in my heart in Jesus, it was, now you get involved. So now you go do stuff, which again, I'm all for us getting involved in the mission of Jesus in this, our seen work in the unseen kingdom of God. And then it was trust. You trust and obey. Where I think with teenagers today, starting with identity, is understanding who you are, and understanding who you are is always connected to your creator. The created is always shaped by their view of the creator, and vice versa. And so for the student ministry I work with, it's called Sons and Daughters. And I tell them every week, you are sons and daughters of King Jesus, and he's a good father. I want you to understand who you are and who God is, as opposed to me just saying, hey, trust God. Hey, you've given your life to God, just trust God. Because I think there's a question of, well, how do I know God can be trusted? And how do I know, how am I going to trust somebody if I don't feel like they're relevant to my life today? So I think starting with identity and understanding of who you are as sons and daughters of King Jesus, and the Holy Spirit lives in you. You are his child. You are sealed until the day of redemption. And he is a good, loving father. We start there. And then we move into the idea of trusting. Then we move into the idea of not striving the mountain, like scaling, earning, and not sitting back in passivity, but trusting Jesus. Walking into the cave is our allegory of trusting Jesus. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path, even if it's just one step at a time. But I think the key is starting with identity, not secondary identity, not, oh, you're a football player, oh, you play music, but your core identity, which you are a loved son of King Jesus, who's a good father. You understand that other identities in our life, they have to be earned, they have to be kept, they can be stolen, they can be stripped away. This is an identity that it cannot be taken from you as a son of King Jesus, who's a good father. So that's one of the things that we did differently, I think, maybe than what back in my day, or maybe back in your day, where you started and you're like, hey, you're in. All right, go get to work, go trust God, get to work, do some stuff. Let's start by understanding who you are, and let's look into scripture to say, who does God say that you are?
I like that. The book itself, then, you're in a perfect world. You hope to accomplish what by writing the book the way you did, and aiming it the way you did? What's your, like I said, in a perfect world, what are you really hoping to come from having written this?
Yeah, and I think what we're already experiencing is, particularly from what I would say was our target demographic, which was a 25-year-old, getting feedback from them being like, I found myself in Tal's story. I felt like I could relate at every turn of the page. I think that's a big goal. So then we created an experience guide, Rory, and it wasn't an experience guide where it was like, let's just take the chapter and add a few discussion questions. Like, this is fully immersive experience guide. So for the students in my student ministry, I have about 30 students. About half of them read, they like reading. The other half I don't think would read if I threatened their lives. And so we've done these 5-6 minute animation videos of each chapter. So together as a group, we can watch that chapter because I don't want to be, dependent on you to read your chapter, during the week. And then we have things that we do together to live out and talk about it. We have a chapter on shame, and we have this experience where we write out these messages that we believed about ourselves, whether it was given to us by somebody else or it was just something that we began to believe, that I'm unlovable and nobody cares about me, nobody likes me, I'm worthless, whatever, some extreme, some not so extreme. And then we speak truth over each other, and you can erase those on a white, a dry erase marker, and replace those with truth of what God says about you. So it really is this experience, because we can read things, keep them on the left side of our brain, keep them up in our head, but to move them to the right side of our brain and into our bodies, involves our emotions, involves relationships and experiences. So I think really what I would love for people who are like, hey man, I don't know who you are, I'm not so sure, check out the book. I totally get it. But if you read it and you're like, yeah, I really, I like what y'all are saying here, then to transfer that into an experience with a few other people, I think that's where the power happens, is in the context of those high trust, authentic communities where you can grow together through these core ideas.
Nice. And that you said that there's an addendum, something that goes with the book,
Yeah.
experience guide. Is that right?
Yeah. The Path Experience Guide, same thing. It's 8 sessions, just like there's 8 chapters. And they have these, beautiful animation videos that go with them, none of which are longer than 6 minutes long. So you can read the chapter, or you could just watch the video in 6 minutes and get the idea of what's going on. So yeah. And then that then in turn sets you up to have some discussion and to do some immersive experiences, have some homework that you do throughout the week until you get back together. I think it's extremely powerful.
Nice. Okay. So this is, if it's got all the videos and everything, then this is an ebook package that's available someplace, or is it a hardcover and then, also an actual video? How's it packaged, and how could people pick it up if they wanted to go check it out?
Right. Yeah. The One of the easiest places to go is trueface.org, TRUEFACE.org /the path. And then you could also go to Amazon and search The Path, Benjamin Crawshaw, my name, and it'll pop up. The experience guide will pop up. And then also the audiobook just came out not too long ago, and getting tons of great feedback from that. We did a lot of work trying to kind of figure out who was going to do that audiobook. I haven't listened to it, but I'm getting texts from people that are like, this audiobook is amazing. I'm not an audiobook guy. I don't know if you are, Rory, but people who are like, this audiobook is incredible. So I'm going to have to check it out at some point.
It's funny. I do some audiobooks,
Right.
especially since some really are only coming out on audiobooks. And if I have the choice between an audiobook and an ebook, I'll choose the audiobook every time.
Right.
But I really do prefer the old fashioned, like, book in my
Right.
hands. So
Yes.
is it
And
available in that way?
yeah, we don't have an ebook. It is, so the Path is hardcover, and it's a
I
beautiful
see.
book. I mean, it looks awesome. We put a ton of work into that. The experience guide is paperback. It's a little bit bigger but shorter to go through. But yeah, you could look it up. The Path. It's a cool looking book. So we definitely wanted it to feel like it had something to it when you held it in your hands.
No, for sure. I love that. The You have talked about the achievement trap. Now, is that just what we talked about earlier, or is there more to that in terms of how that plays into this entire idea?
Well, I'll return that question with a question, and I think a lot of podcasters, maybe you don't get a lot of questions pop back at you, but I mean you are doing this a lot. You have boys of your own, but just the landscape, and maybe this is just a tale as old as time, which is just I have these things as a young person in my mind that when I get to there, I'm going to be okay. Have you seen that? There's just this idea. As soon as I get to this place, whatever that may be, it's different for everybody. It may be as soon as I get a certain number of followers on Instagram, or as soon as I get to college, or as soon as I get that sports scholarship, or as soon as, then everything's going to be okay. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think I've lived my whole life that way.
Right. I did a podcast with a guy who he was an old military guy, and he was like, yeah, I was going up they make it clear in the Army, and I was going up these ranks. As soon as I'm going to hit this, and then I'm going to hit that, and you think as soon as I get there, then I'm going to be okay. And you get there and you're like, oh, wait, but there's always a level up there, right? There's always that next thing. And that's a little bit the performance trap. Now, the world we live in today offers more routes or more, we call them booths in the path. It's, more routes than ever. Maybe back in our day, you go to college, you get a job, all that stuff. And now it's like, man, you can be a self-made millionaire or something, or all these different places. The world is offering more than it ever has before, and so now we're looking around at all these places and thinking, if I could get that, or if I could have a life like that, or now we see it because of social media. Oh, I want what they have. Then it's this constant, landscape in front of our minds that thinks, once I achieve this specific thing, then I will have arrived, and therefore I will be okay. I will feel okay in my heart and in my spirit. And I think you're saying you've not only experienced that in your life, but you've seen it from people in and around your life too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. And unfortunately, I think it's probably one of the tools we use to raise our boys the
Right.
way that we did. So, yeah, but I understand what you're saying about it. There is always another level, no matter where you get to.
Right.
And with this, there's not.
Yeah. I mean, it is my middle daughter is an incredible athlete. She does competitive cheer, which is, you know, anybody who says those aren't athletes, that's crazy. We should go out there and try it. They're doing some wild stuff out there. And it is this thing of, the next level, the next level, the next level. And so as her dad, hey man, I'm encouraging you to be as good as you can at what you're doing, being, and it's great. Sports are great. She's answering to a team. She's showing up on time. She has accountability to an authority figure. And you got to show up, and you got to be ready to do what you got to be ready to do. And so sports teach incredible lessons. But this is why I come back to identity, Rory, and this is what I'm trying to tell her. Your identity is not as a competitive cheerleader, because at some point that's going to end. At some point you go on, I don't know how many levels they're going to have by the time you get into college, and there's professional whatever, you do it forever. At some point that ends. Or what happens if you wake up one day and you're like, I don't think I want to do this anymore? Is your identity gone at that point? Are you left with nothing because all of your identity is based on that? So when people meet you and they're like, who are you? And you say, I'm a cheerleader. I'm like, no, that's your secondary identity. That is something that God can use in your life to give you build relationships, to build character in you, to allow you to have a platform to communicate with other people, to give you influence with younger cheerleaders. But who you are a loved son, a loved daughter of King Jesus, who's a good father. That's who you are. That cannot be taken away. That cannot be stripped away. You can't get an injury and lose your identity as a daughter of King Jesus. So I again, some of this as parents, we push this. My oldest is so driven academically, and I'm just like, hey, I love the drive. I want you to know I'm not putting that pressure on you. You're putting that pressure on yourself. I just want to make that clear. Okay. Don't blame me for what you're feeling right now, And I love that. I think you got an incredible brain that God has given you, and you're being a good steward of it. However, that is not your identity, as getting into Georgia Tech. That's not who you are. That may be a great part of what God does in your life, but who you are is a loved daughter of King Jesus. And so there's all this work that I think we have to do as leaders, as parents of young people, when it comes to identity, because all of this drive for achievement, to get something, be something, thinking it's connected to who I am, it's part of how God wired you, which God can use as part of your secondary identity. It's not your primary identity. And if you go to it for your primary identity, which I have, maybe you have in your life, then we'll find ourselves like Solomon found himself. Solomon is like, I went everywhere. I did everything. That's what Ecclesiastes is. And at the end of the day, it was like, it's just, I found everything, got everything, achieved everything, and it was meaningless. And I'm not trying to tell my kids that, hey, what you're doing is meaningless. I'm not going to, I'm not going like Ecclesiastes doomsday on them or anything like that, Rory. But I am saying at some point, it just comes up wanting and lacking. Sorry, I got a little long-winded there. I got a little preachy there. My bad.
You were doing great. You were on fire. I wasn't getting in the way. I
I
loved
need
it.
some of that coffee over there that you're drinking now.
Yeah, I only have the decaf version for you. No, no,
Yeah, right.
no.
That's probably smart.
I love that. It sounds a little bit like there's some a sense of instead of always striving for the next thing, there's a sense of kind of like being giving yourself a little grace, being grateful for what you have, appreciating where you are, accepting that you already have this relationship with God that's like ready for you to step into, and all you have to do is just accept it. You don't have to work for it. You just have to accept it. Am I close on that?
Yeah. And I think, for people who are like, well, what's going to happen then? Then at that point, do you quit trying? You don't care anymore. And it's like, no, it is so different to do it from a position of wanting and knowing who I am, as opposed to doing it from a position of striving and earning to gain some type of identity. I'll give you an example. And with men listening to this, this might be a great for the Christian audience of men who are watching this. The book Celebration of Discipline. I love that book. I don't know if you've read that book, you're familiar with that book.
No.
And it talks about these disciplines that we can do as a means of putting ourselves in a position, to grow in our walk with God, right? Well, early on in my walk, to get that book, I saw those things as something I had to do in order to be okay with God. I talk about the 2000 movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Sure do.
And then Joaquin Phoenix played Emperor Commodus. And Commodus comes out there with his thumb out to the side, and he's kind of trying, based on the crowd or based on his mood, to decide the fate of the gladiator. That's the way I viewed God growing up, was just Emperor Commodus out there looking at me. And, most of the time it was a thumbs down because, I was a preacher's kid who just acted like a preacher's kid, right? And so, turning my life, giving my life to God, and then reading Celebration of Discipline, I was like, oh, this is my way to get the thumbs up from Emperor Commodus God, right? But then as my view of myself changed and my view of God changed, and I saw God more as the father and the prodigal son who's coming out, I more from the book of Romans, 11 chapters of Paul speaking into identity. And then chapter 12 is therefore. Now, in light of this, now we can talk about behavior. Well, it's different once you understand who you are and whose you are. And so now reading Celebration of Discipline, I'm like, what a gift. What a gift. A good God, a loving good God has given me these different gifts, these different practices that followers of Jesus have been doing for thousands of years as ways of putting ourselves in a position to hear from him more readily. Well, that's a different approach, Rory, than me saying, oh, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to white knuckle it and I'm going to do all these things in order to get Emperor Commodus to give me a thumbs up. It's just a different way of looking at it. You know what I mean?
I love the example of the Emperor Commodus, with the thumbs
Right.
up and thumbs down, because I think that's how we all kind of viewed God. Someone who just had total power and just made these decisions, randomly about life.
Right. And it was
Right.
distant. It was off up in the sky, and it
Right.
wasn't personal. And, I read this passage in Hebrews that talking about how after he had, the high priest had, offered a sacrifice for sins of one for all time, which is Jesus. It says he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And, in the old temple system, there was no chairs. Chairs were illegal in the temple system because the high priest could not sit down. They were constantly offering sacrifices for the sins of the people. Why? Because the people were constantly sinning, right? So they had work to do at all times. And then Hebrews is like, once the high priest, once and for all, offered one sacrifice for all time, for all people, he sat down. Well, my view of God growing up was like, oh man, I got to, go offer sacrifices for my sins, offer sacrifices for my sins so I can get a thumbs up for a little while. Let me try to remember everything I've done wrong so I can confess it and be okay. And I think that Jesus was like, hey man, I've taken care of all that. Now I want to be involved in your life, in the random Tuesdays of your life. And I just thought God wanted me to behave, go to church, don't do certain things. And I just didn't think God cared about my Tuesday afternoons, and God didn't care about my baseball career, and God didn't care about my dating life and what happened at school. God only cared about the big church stuff, right? And then as my view of God began to change, and it wasn't Emperor Commodus, it was a good and loving father, then it was like, a good and loving father cares about all aspects. With your sons, you care about all aspects of their life. You're not like, oh, only talk to me about the financial stuff, or only come talk to me when you got something good to talk about. It's like, no, you can talk to me about anything. So that really shifted things for me. I quit seeing God as this distant emperor and started seeing God as a good and loving personal father who not only loved me but likes me. And therefore, I was like, yeah, I want you involved in the ins and outs of my everyday life because I need your help, because I'm down here trying to figure it out. And some days I don't feel like I have anything figured out. And it's just different. It's different to walk with Jesus than to walk for Jesus. Does that make sense, Roy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As I'm listening to this, I know that one of the things that you're trying to do is get to, the young people, the 25-year-old, mindset. A lot of our listeners are young folks, but we have a lot of fathers that are in this podcast. So I think one of my questions that keeps kind of popping up as I'm listening to you, talk about all this is what can fathers do? Um, if they're stuck, if their kids haven't quite had, that upbringing that they probably should, and they know it, what can fathers do? Say they listen to this podcast, what can they turn this off, go home and start doing to
Yeah.
start changing this, start turning
Yeah.
this around?
Yeah. I think, and I want you to chime in on this too. So I'll do what I've been doing here, which just on my uncaffeinated coffee, going on my rants, Rory, but I do want you to chime in as well. I think the first thing that the dads who are watching this can do is show themselves a little bit of grace. We're doing the best that you can with what you have and what you've known at each moment along the way. And it hasn't been perfect. And you can walk into shame and convince yourself that you're a screw up and a failure, or you may have come to this podcast right on time. You may be right where you need to be right on time for today for a reason. And I think, I've worked in public schools when it comes to mental health, and schools will call me when there's something happens and to come in and talk about mental health and, talk a lot about mental nutrition and a lot about, but when I'm working with parents directly, a lot of times it is just, it's kind of basic and simple stuff about getting outside, walking around, eating enough protein, drinking enough water, getting sunlight. I think, Rory, we are in a day and age where information is available at all times everywhere. The next generation has more information available to them than you and I have had in our entire lifetime, right? They have it
Absolutely.
at their fingertips. So information is not a premium necessarily like it may have been at some point in time because they have access to it. You and I could argue about stats about the old Yankees or old sports stats, and now we can look it up, right? And so it's not as the information is not as valuable as a commodity. So what becomes more valuable is experiences, right? Experiences. So it's like if I'm eating fast food all the time, wow, I really want a home cooked meal. If I'm oversaturating myself in information all the time, what I want is a real authentic experience. Well, first of all, that's where Jesus shows up. When Jesus walked around, Jesus could have given more information to anybody anywhere. Jesus asked questions, he looked people in the eye, he listened to them and created an authentic experience with them. And so that's what people are looking for. This is not a post-Christian culture. This is a post-truth culture. And so people want something that's real. So as dads, one of the most incredible things that you can do is just go for a walk with your teenage son or daughter, or just say, hey, let's go eat and let's just sit down, and we're not going to force anything. It's not going to be weird. We're just going to go hang out and have an authentic experience in person with each other. Let's get out of the house. Let's go move around. Let's go throw the football, frisbee, whatever. My middle, I told you she's a great athlete, but how much can I go out and do when it comes to competitive cheer, right? I can't. I could go try to stunt you, but I don't want to go drop you on your head. And so we go out and play volleyball, and it's like neither one of us are terrible, but neither one of us are great. But it's just us moving around, being in the same place as each other, not distracted by technology. My oldest, I'm like, hey, you want to meet me at Las Palmas, which is a Mexican restaurant down the road, and let's just be in each other's presence. You want to go to Kroger, we'll just go walk around. And so I think that's one of the things I would say for dads. Just go be somewhere with your kid and don't worry about the information. Don't worry about having answers. Just ask questions. And when the opportunity presents itself, um, admit some of your own limitations or your own struggles. You don't want to go TMI. You don't have to overdo it. But I think just admitting the fact that you struggle, you worry, you have a fear somewhere, you're not sure about something, that's a real authentic experience with people. And I think that's just highly valued these days.
I love
All
that.
right,
Real, real authentic experience. I like that.
you're up. I want to
For
hear
us,
what
it
you
was.
think.
I love what you said. For it hit home because for my kids, all three of them, my daughter as well, it was playing catch, and it was that
Yeah,
exact thing. I'd come home and it'd be like, "Hey, let's go play catch immediately,"
right.
and I never said no. So it was, but that
Yeah,
was our time to be there, to not have
yeah,
any expectation. There was no pressure, and you just talk about whatever comes up,
yeah,
and you connect for a minute.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that time's invaluable. So that's
yeah.
fantastic advice. Just to kind of break it all down and get back to go play some catch.
Yeah. And it sounds simple. And I know for some of you, you're gonna feel like you're having to drag somebody, you know, off to something that they don't want to do. But sometimes, my youngest, I'm like, we're gonna go for a walk. I don't want to go for a walk. And I'm like, well, just come on. And then, I'm kind of forcing her a little bit. And then by the time we make it around the block, she's having a great time. And so I can start with her earlier because she's 7. I know for some of you, you're working with teenagers who have been, they've gotten into a pattern maybe of staying a little more isolated. They may give you some pushback at first. Just stick with it. Just stick with it. Keep encouraging them. And at times, maybe saying, hey, no, no options here. We're going to go out here. We're going to go for a walk. We're going to do whatever. And, over time, they may be like, hey, what happened to our walk? I thought we were going on walks. And you're like, I thought you hated that. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, you never know. So go start making those kinds of investments. And I think one day you'll be glad you did.
That's beautiful. Just continue to build the connection.
That's right.
Absolutely great answer. Great answer to that question. And I appreciate it because I didn't like prep you for any of these, and you're just kind of fielding everything I throw at you beautifully. So I really do. I appreciate, you bringing that here.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And I think, what you're doing and the audience of men and fathers and people who are just trying to figure this out. And I know as a man and friends with a lot of men who are a lot of fathers, a lot of times we feel this sense of this quiet question of, not measuring up, right? Right. And feeling like we're not doing it. And it's just this kind of this subtle nagging voice of shame that because we've been inundated with it, Rory. Like this is how we were raised. You achieve, you achieve, you achieve, and you're never achieving enough. And
Right.
so we kind of have this default shame mode that we've walked with since we were, little kids. And sports fuels that. Sometimes church and Christianity fuels that. And so for the dads who are just like, man, this is tough. I just want to encourage you. Like you're right where you need to be. Cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace, speak kindly to yourself, and get out there and give it a shot with your kids. Try to make a connection. Ask God to help you open some doors that seem a little bit shut right now, and you never know what could happen.
I love it. That's a great way to kind of bring us, down to sort of wrapping things up here, in the interest of time. Let me, first of all, thank you for everything you brought to the show today. I really appreciate it. Really looking forward to checking out the book. The, I want to end by giving you the floor though. And so let me just kind of say, is there anything that I didn't ask you about? Is there anything that maybe we talked about, but you want to just drive home a little, harder? Maybe a nugget or a piece of advice for everybody. The last couple minutes are yours.
Yeah, I do appreciate you having me. I think to go full circle with what I've experienced at TrueFace is the power of being in high trust, high authentic community. And again, something that men aren't always naturally good at. I'm not. I mean, even my best friend from college, he and I, we call ourselves the Island Boys. We have such a tendency to go to isolation, especially when things are overwhelming or difficult, right? So I do want to encourage your viewers and your listeners um, to not be opposed to the idea of getting yourself in a community or in a group with other men where you can talk about what's really happening in your life and you can uncross your arms a little bit and you can be real. I mean, even if you watch Roy's podcast and somebody else watches it and you guys just call each other and talk about it and just share your feelings about what was being said or what you agree with or disagree with or what you're struggling with, even that is just a good step of coming out of isolation and not just living by yourself or not just thinking, oh, it's just my spouse and I, just my wife and I, and we're fine. I don't need somebody else. You do need some other men in your life that you can talk about what's really going on in your life. So I think, again, especially with a lot of dads, but just all the men who are watching this, all the young men who are watching this, the beauty of having a brotherhood, of having other guys with you that want the same thing for your life that you want for your life. And y'all can journey together, encourage each other, pick each other up when you're struggling, reminding each other of who you really are. I just want to encourage you, even if it's not natural, to make that step in your life.
Great way to close this up. Absolutely fantastic. Benjamin Crawshaw, Christian leader and author of The Path. Benjamin, thank you so much for everything you brought today, all the authenticity and the word and everything that you shared. I love your viewpoint, and I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Folks, this has been another episode of the Power of Man podcast. And, the reason that we bring powerful men like this on here with, these messages that are as powerful as they are, talking about these topics that are so pertinent to all of us, talking about young people, how to lead them, how to help them, how to help them grow. The reason we do that is because we're trying to help you in your mission to protect, provide for, lead your families, to be better men and fathers and husbands tomorrow than we are today. And, a key to all of it is to, like Benjamin said, give yourself a little bit of grace and realize that you do, in fact, have value. You do matter. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.